Lots of people will say the links aren't there in an argument when they've not spent a single moment looking for any link, but if in response to that the person they're arguing with can't immediately, off the top of their head, you know, scholarly list off links, it seems like they've won. It's a sly little tactic, but it works for them, and it's quite argumentatively common to see people attack a point just by saying, well, you're making an assumption with no basis, and perhaps that person knows of the basis, but just because they can't come at the other person with, an exact explanation in the moment, the person's like, oh, no, you can't say anything, and they cut them off before and kind of end any more solicitation. It's like really, really snaky to do, and I've seen it very commonly used in sort of arguments like where people say that there's definitely some sort of causation to capitalism being responsible for mental illness, or bureaucratic processes damaging schools or the NHS, or so on and so on. People say that there's no links, the links aren't there, and how can they say that without, like, what evidence do they have to say that links aren't there when they've made no instance? It's one of those examples of just a complete throwing away of the issue. You're shirking it off without any point, without any substance, just to get rid of the issue. Because if the issue is no longer being thrown at you, and it looks, or it can look when, taken in a certain way, like your opponent is unable to back up their argument, then that's good for you in your favour. That's an argumentative tactic, but it's not an argumentative tactic of good intention or anything. It is like anti-argument. It is you winning the argument by cheating, quite honestly. You're taking, a complete disregard for fact, and you are just saying, well, no, can't be, because you have been unable to subsidize your point, because I've literally held you against antinomian rule of argument. Like, it makes no sense how people believe this, and people do believe this. I've seen Ben Shapiro use this tactic before, where he says, well, you can't say that, or there's no evidence for that, or so on and so on and so on, and then cuts the person off before they're able to provide anything. It's media training argument. This is what people learn when they want to be a professional television personnel debatee, because it works, it's snappy, it shuts down the argument, and it makes you appear successful in the argument. You don't win the argument, you don't win anything, you just appear successful. And there are so many debatees out there who argue with the intention of appearing successful and appearing like they won. They want to look like they dominate the argument, because the majority of people witnessing televised debates aren't taking in the points. They aren't caring for what's being said. They're just watching it and like, oh, it looks like he's won, it looks like she's won, it looks like this person has won, because in their rhetoric and techniques, they are dominating, they are throwing themselves out as the abundant figure without any evidence. They are winning if it were an altercation, but as a battle of facts, they've done nothing, they've made no change, they've thrown nothing into the mix. They've just sort of demeaned and devalued the other person's points with a nothing. Which, it makes no sense how something can be devalued by nothing, but it does when you completely cut off that person's arguments, shut them out of the debate, and say, oh no, it can't be that because this doesn't exist, and I'm not going to give you a moment to explain how it does exist. It's snaky and sly and very common to see people use these techniques to not get the upper hand, but to sort of go from under and pull the legs out from their opponent. There's no debate technique, there's no tactic, there's no, strength behind it. It's just like malicious cunning, and it's very common in lots of modern and lots of, I'm sure, ancient, but I have never seen ancient speakers, arguments on sides of losing battles to win. It's something that wins, which really, really shouldn't, and it just shows the danger of rhetoric and language technique. So be careful for people like this, because one, they're really bad for debate environment, And two, they're just usually dickheads.